Cabinet meeting. Before we start, I'd like to remind you that the meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be available to watch, listen on the council website. We have, to save time, I could actually list sorry, one moment. I'll list the people who are present to make it a lot easier. So if I do it in alphabetical order, we have Councillor Adam Swirsky, Alex Dewsnap, Council Officer, Councillor Antonio Weiss, Charlie Stewart, Officer, Councillor Christine Robson, I saw Dawn Calvert, Officer, Hugh Peart, our Monitoring Officer, John Higgins, who's Member of Cabinet, Jonathan Milburn, Council Officer, Kanti Rabadia, Councillor Kanti Rabadia, Councillor Keith Ferry, Councillor Krishna Suresh, Liz Evans, who's Support Officer for Council, Councillor Marilyn Ashton, Councillor Paul Osborne, Paul Walker, Council Officer, Paul Hewitt, Council Officer, Councillor Phil O'Dell, Councillor Pritish Patel, Councillor Richard Almond, Sean Harris, Chief Executive, Councillor Simon Brown, Councillor Sue Anderson and Councillor Varsha Palmer. We also have 4 officers from Democratic Services, which is, I'll do them in alphabetical order by first name, which is Andre Botma, Darren Davis, Elaine McEachran and Nicoletta Nikolova. Have I included everybody? Thank you. So, oh, someone said they cannot see me. I am here. Is there something on my camera, Andre?
Yes, Councillor, and it appears that if you can try switch your camera on and off for us and see if that restarts it for you, but it's something on your side, unfortunately.
I can see myself sitting there on the screen. No. One moment. We will pause. Don't go anywhere.
That's fine. You're on now.
I'm back. Yes, I think my iPad clicked in and was overriding. So just to remind you of some of the protocols for the virtual meetings which have been distributed, and I'd just like to remind you of a few. Could everyone please ensure that they have their videos on at all times and microphones on mute unless speaking. When speaking, could you please ensure that you mitigate against external sounds like mobile phones and very noisy neighbours. I would also ask that you use the raise hand function from the toolbar to indicate if you want to speak. In case there's a technical problem with the meeting, we may adjourn for a short period while to try and resolve the issue, which we've just done. But if the technical problem persists and the meeting is incorrect, the meeting will be abandoned and rearranged for a later date. When we come to the recommendations for each report, all members of Cabinet must clearly state that they have heard the discussion and agree with the proposed decision recommendation before it can be taken. For ease of that and the voting, I will use the order as set out in the agenda. It is now 6:03. So we've started the meeting and it's 6:03 on the 18th of June. So apologies for absence. I haven't received any apologies for absence, all present and correct. Declarations of interest. Could I have declarations of disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests, please? Firstly, from members of Cabinet. No hands have risen. From other members present. No hands have risen. Petitions. All petitioners have 1 minute to read out the terms of petition. Are there any petitions from Cabinet members? No. I have received notification that we have a petition from Councillor Rabadia, who said he would like to present a petition tonight. Kanti, do you want to read out the terms of the petition, please?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. This is a petition from the Kenton West residents, and this is in relation to an objection to Harrow Street Spacious Plan. Now, we've had a street Harrow Spaces plan, and this petition is in reference to PS07 Stratfield Road, PS11 Kenton Lane Service Road, and Kingshill Avenue. The terms of the petition is, we, the residents of the above and surrounding streets, strongly object to the above proposals, which will affect us from the knock-on effect of increased traffic, pollution, and increased displaced parking in our streets. The plans have not been thought through and are not supported by any meaningful data. The plans will also have a detrimental effect on local businesses and our ability to access them. Our road is narrow enough with existing restaurant traffic. With Kingshill Avenue proposed plan, the traffic and parking overspill will be diverted onto a road as well as residents visiting their family on Kingshill, reference LTN 01. So the petition has been signed by 154 people. It includes residents from areas that will be affected in roads nearby, including businesses and business owners in the 3 spots noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ganti. You've emailed that through to Democratic Services, I believe, so they will pick that up and forward it through to the relevant officer.
All right, thank you.
We now move to switching. So now, are there any other petitions from members of council? Are there any petitions from members of the public? I haven't been notified of any, so I'll take that as a no. Right, so public questions. We've received no public questions until the deadlines. Moving to item 5, which is councillor questions. A total of 10 questions have been received from the Conservative group, members of the Conservative group. All 10 questions are set out in the question pack, which are on the council website. However, subject to time availability, 6 of them will be responded to at this meeting. The remaining 4 will be answered in writing. So could I go to question number 1, which is from Councillor Ashton?
Yes, thank you, Leader. This question is to Councillor Keith Ferry, Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Regeneration, Planning and Employment. Is Councillor Ferry satisfied that residents and businesses are able to access Harrow's planning web pages and register their support or objections to the current planning applications?
Thank you very much, Marilyn. My officers continue to monitor the planning web pages and are testing them on a daily basis. There are limited times when the site is not available during the day, as the system has to be updated every 24 hours. From the number of comments we are receiving online on a daily basis, seems to evidence that any issues are limited. In those instances where comments have not been able to be uploaded, residents and businesses also have the opportunity to email officers directly to put forward their representations.
Yes, thank you. If I may ask a supplemental question to that. I think the problem is this, that funnily enough, I had a shadow planning portfolio holder briefing this afternoon, and I was informed that the whole system actually needs replacing. It's not fit for purpose. And that obviously, when it's put under quite a lot of strain, when we have very contentious planning applications, it's rather sunk under the weight. Now, the reason why I'm asking this question is because it's become very obvious over many years that this isn't fit for purpose. And I think that when you knew as portfolio holder that there may be a very contentious planning application coming in with the likely outcome of a lot of objections, at that point of time, did you not consider making other arrangements to cope with that, rather than have people tearing their hair out, unable to put in their objections? Do you not think that reduces the confidence that people have in this council's ability to get things done properly?
Well, what we have done, we've got 4 supposedly contentious planning applications at the moment. 3 on London Underground car park sites and 1 in West Harrow, and we've set up a mini website on the council's website purely to handle those applications. So there's 4 mini websites that are set up, and they can handle the huge number of objections that we're expected to receive. I mean, recently we've had the application from the mosque, which is now withdrawn. We've seen over 3,000 objections being put up onto the website, and all these objections have to be checked before they're put on the website manually, and that creates a lot of work for our staff to do. And obviously there are people that have put objections up and haven't seen them appear straight away. But we did manage to load all the objections for the mosque onto our website. Our website does need updating, and IT, who are in fact the people that are controlling our website, have said that they will look into an alternative method of doing it, because it's certainly not in the 21st century yet. I'm not saying that I'm not having anything to do with the website. It's the IT department's problem rather than the planning department's problem. But as the planners and the general public aren't able to access the applications as they need to, and I've certainly had problems with it, it does need updating. I will agree.
Good. Well, I'm pleased about that. My second question, interestingly enough, is also to Councillor Keith Ferry. Is Councillor Ferry content that Harrow Council statutory notifications in respect of current planning applications are accurate and efficient?
Thank you again. Notifications on all current planning applications are carried out in accordance with statutory requirements and the Council Statement of Community Involvement. In several cases, the consultations carried out have exceeded those requirements, and you'll be aware that the government have issued guidance over the last 3 or 4 months to say that we can carry on planning as normal, and that the consultations could be carried out in accordance with previous requirements and requirements that are more digital.
If I may ask a supplemental question, I think the problem is this, that a whole load of notifications went out about the application for the Ridgeway, and they were all wrong, the whole lot of them. The address was wrong, and also the amount of time that was given to respond was wrong, and people got very upset about that. And again, their confidence was shattered in our ability to do things correctly. In addition to that, the TfL developments, the Cannons Part 1 in particular, that was all sent out wrongly, just to one person by email with all the wrong dates on and the wrong times. And then a whole load of them was sent out to stakeholders, again, completely incorrect. I think the problem is that we're making mistakes like that. And okay, it is more of a challenge at the moment. I don't think anyone's disputing that. But the reason why I'm asking you this question is that when an application is contentious and people are anxious about it, it's very important that we get the administration right. But can I have your assurance that you will take a personal interest to make sure that the department runs correctly and we don't make these mistakes in future?
Well, I wasn't aware of the mistakes that you were referring to, but in regard to the Ridgeway and the 3 car park sites, we agreed with the applicants that we would defer any public consultation until the middle of June, rather than during the pandemic. We've increased the amount of time for the consultations from the statutory 3 weeks to 6 weeks. But if you've got details of things being sent out incorrectly, then I'd ask you to send them to me and to the Chief Planning Officer. Oh,
she knows about it. I spoke to her. It's all been sorted, but I'm surprised you don't know what's going on in your own department.
Thank you, Marilyn. Do you want to ask question number 3?
Yes, please. And this is to you, Leader. Does the council need to believe that turning the Civic Centre purple or green is an effective way of showing support for worthy causes? And who gets to decide which causes qualify?
Thank you, Marilyn. I think showing solidarity with Black Lives Matter by lighting the Civic Centre purple following the killing of George Floyd was vitally important for the council to do as the community leader in a culturally diverse borough. Much more important though, is for the council to work with local communities to tackle racism and inequality, as highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we will continue to prioritise this. I think there's a number of voices need to be heard, and as people know, shining a light is a normal way of actually rising up and showing the issues that are important to most people. Similarly, along with most London boroughs, we lit the Civic Centre green to commemorate and remember the 72 people who lost their lives at Grenfell just 3 years ago. So these small symbolic events, which cost very little to the council, are important to many of our residents, and as leader of the council, I am pleased to take the decision on behalf of the council to do so.
Thank you. If I ask a supplemental question, Leader, well, of course, we all support the fight against racism and share everyone's outrage at the manner and the way that George Floyd died in the US. And there's no question about that. We all are outraged at that and support Black Lives Matter. Of course we do. And also we're all terribly upset about Grenfell. And of course, the anniversary is very poignant and very moving. But the point is that we could, if actually light up the Civic Centre to show support for Muslims in China who are being persecuted by the government, or we could light up the building to show solidarity with the LGBT people in Putin's Russia as systematically discriminated against. Or we could express our disgust at the mistreatment of millions of people in North Korea. And I mean, there's a long list. And I think the problem I've got, and I totally understand what you just said, but there are a lot of very worthy causes. And when you set a precedent of doing these things, I just worry a little bit about who gets to decide which causes. And with respect, I think there's quite a lot of us involved here. I wonder why you can't work a little bit more collaboratively with the opposition and other people to take a little bit more soundings to the things that they hold dear, as well as the things that you think are important. I wonder if you could undertake to do that in future before you make these decisions on everybody else's behalf.
Thank you, Marion. I just think over the past 10 years, we've seen growing inequalities across many ethnic minority community groups in our own borough. And we'll be using the recovery strategies to actively address inequalities to create that long-term change that we desperately need. I think what you need to realise that it's the importance of some of these events that mean so much to so many people. The Black Lives Matter movement is not something that's just popped up this week, this month or this year because of the death of George Floyd. This has been going on for a few years and is building momentum with it. And I think as well, we also need to sort of deal with some of the health inequalities that are taking place, and we'll also be targeting the rising levels of poverty across the borough and all those sort of points. But this is national incidents that hit our communities hard, and on that basis is why we brought it forward to light up, and I think we were right to do so, to light the Civic Centre up purple on the remembrance of George Floyd when he was his funeral, and also for Grenfell, the 3 years recovery. We also have lit the council up in multicolours on the LGBT, and we have done other highlighted other events of national importance over the years. So if you have any that you believe we should do, you can always contact me, and then we'll have to consider that as we go forward.
I think I was asking if you to do it the other way around, but not to worry. Right, my next question is for Councillor Varsha Palmer. Hello, Varsha.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi, you okay?
Yeah.
Right, at last month's cabinet, Councillor Palmer stated that it is unfair to raise the issue of garden waste stickers not being received by those who have paid for the garden waste service. 1 month later, is she satisfied that Harrow Council's customers have now received their stickers?
Okay, Marilyn, thank you for your question. Just to correct you, I did not quite say that. I said that it was unfair for you to be so critical of a service that we had just started. However, to answer your question in short, the answer is yes. And just to add to that, we have put robust process in processes in place to ensure that all stickers go out in a timely manner?
I'm terribly sorry to disappoint you, and I'm sure that you're only saying what you're saying because that's what you've been told by your officers. And please forgive me, I don't wish to go behind what they've told you, but I think that's actually the wrong answer, and it's not right. I can only speak for myself, but I have spoken to other colleagues. We are receiving a lot of emails from people who still haven't had their stickers, and we're also receiving a lot of emails from people who've had 2 or 3 lots of stickers. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them try to sell them on eBay. But the point is this, that somehow there's a mismatch between what you're saying in answer to the question and what is actually happening. And I would urge you, and if I would just ask you to please have another look through, I think you'll find that whatever you've been told is not right, that people are still not getting their stickers. And also, we have told the bin men to empty the dustbins that, garden waste dustbins that haven't got the stickers, so that people don't get left out. But they're not doing that. They're just going straight on. So I've got a lot of stuff of complaints on this. We all have, and I don't think people are making it up.
Okay, Marilyn. So what you were asking me last time, the backlog has been cleared. We have got stickers outstanding, which are for new subscribers, and the teams did give a 2-week window where we did empty all the garden waste bins, because we knew that after the crises, it was important to ensure that we would do that and then start kind of fresh with the stickers and that. So I'm not sure, you kind of repeating the same information as last time. I've been assured by my officers, and why would they be lying to me, that the backlog has been cleared and that we have got some stickers, but they are for new subscribers. There are people who have mislaid stickers and that, so we have sorted that out. We have gone and done a cleansing exercise as well to update, to ensure that the duplications that you're talking about had been corrected. So if you still have emails of certain residents that you know about, please email them to me, and I will then have a look with my officers to go through that, because to my knowledge, and having a briefing today on this particular matter, because I know you're very passionate about it as I am, to ensure that we are up to date with it. So if there is still something pending, please send me an email with who or whatever street is not being serviced, then I will look into that for you.
That's very good. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Okay.
Fix it, actually. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good. Right. Now I have one more question, and that's again to you, leader. Does the council leader believe that the council is on track with its regeneration plans?
Yes, we are, in a sense. So the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a delay right across the board in a number of areas, and it has been delayed by about the HSDP has been delayed by about a month. But I can say that it is underway again. People are socially distanced and evaluating the problems, the tenders that have come in. The longer term implications, the emergency and the effect on the council's requirements together with the wider schemes will be subject of ongoing discussion, including with the council's partner when selected.
Yes, thank you, leader. I mean, obviously, we are, as an opposition group, fully briefed and aware of that, and we appreciate that. But I think the problem is this, that you mentioned COVID, and actually, our anxiety is this, that if we don't have a proper think about the plans that we were thinking about before COVID, and about the kind of world that we're going to see, the new normal, as they call it, the change of the amount of money that one can get for letting out office space, the fact that a lot more people will be working from home, and so on. I mean, one would have thought that, although I can understand why you wouldn't want necessarily to do this, but one would have thought that you reconsider a bit more drastically than you are. And I think the problem is that you're going along sort of in this groove and in this direction of travel, which in our view doesn't necessarily and won't necessarily work very well the way that the world is going to end up being now after this pandemic and the way the economy will be. And also, you know, do we really need to have a civic centre? And if we don't, what exactly are we going to do? And what will we do with our plans? It's a very drastic thing. It's not just tweaking things. So I'm asking you, and I'll say this very respectfully to you, would you consider rethinking some of this project? It isn't too late to do that. Wouldn't it be sensible to do that now, rather than end up in a situation where we've got something most unsatisfactory with buildings that we can't let out, and instead of breaking even, which is what we should be doing, we'll end up making a loss. And I don't think we can afford to do that.
There are 2 points, Marilyn. I think Keith might want to add something as well. We have been going for over 19 minutes now, so we're a bit over the time limit, but I think this is an important sort of question.
Thank you.
We'll allow British question as well. I think we also need to remember that the council is working on a large number of sites already, and like the Grange Farm estate, and they're moving those forward. So this is not the only scheme that we have in town. But having said that, on this particular part around the regeneration of the civic centre site, building a new civic centre, that the housing and affordable housing that will come through, we at this stage we're only agreeing with a partner. Now those discussions about what we do going forward might change, but there's scope within the agreement. If you look at the tender document, it's all in there that we've got a flexibility to make some adjustments as we go through the process. The partners have looked at those 4 set out criteria that we put in place and which the tenders are being assessed against. Once those recommended person has come through, it will then be down to scrutiny in cabinet to interrogate that and then make a report decision on that. Keith, did you want to quickly add something to it, as this is your area that you've been heavily involved with?
Yes, I mean, I think the question should have been put to me rather than you, because I have a day-to-day working with officers about this. You're quite correct. The council's partner, the selection of the council's partner for the HSDP is entirely separate from the changes that we will make to our regeneration, and everything that Marilyn said is quite true. We're looking at the use of the Poets Corner, we're looking at the leisure centre, we're looking at the depot and the building that's going in the depot. We're looking at the size of the new civic centre, whether there is a need for a new civic centre. All these things are going on in parallel with the selection process for the HSDP, and we're hoping that we will have most of these finalised for a cabinet report in the September cabinet.
Thank you, Leader.
So I put myself on mute because I've got a noisy motorbike going past. We now have a question from Councillor Pritesh Patel.
Thank you very much, Leader. My question is to Councillor Adam Swirsky, portfolio holder for Finance and Resources, and it's in reference to the Council's COVID response report, which is part of today's Cabinet reports. The table on page 27 of the updated report for the Council's response to COVID shows that the estimated additional impact expenditure for the second submission has increased by 2.8 million to 37.82. Is that correct?
Thanks, Councillor Patel. So yes, the additional expenditure that we are incurring as a result of COVID has increased by 2.8 million between the 2 submissions. The key areas are temporary supported care providers, PPE costs, additional social care demand, SEN transport and waste management in particular. So that's the breakdown of that additional spending.
Okay, thank you. If I may ask a supplementary question to that. I note that the figure takes into account the 17 million NDDR rate relief provided by central government. Why is the 13.1 million received from the government not shown in these figures? And secondly, you indicate that the estimated loss in income has largely remained the same at 23 million between the first and second submissions. This is clearly not the case, as your estimated loss of income shown in the submission document states a figure of 40.663 million, which is almost double the estimated loss. How do you account for this discrepancy, and which is the correct figure?
So I agree it's confusing, and unfortunately the confusion comes from MHCLG itself. For some reason, between the two submissions, they changed the way they wanted us to calculate the income losses. So in the first submission, they wanted our net business rates loss without taking into account. So in other words, the entire loss, but taking into account the grant that government gives us for things like retail rate relief, for example. In the second submission, they said, no, actually, we want the gross business rates loss. So that's the full amount without taking into account the 17 million. So that's why, you know, there's a 17 million pound increase between the two submissions in the totals, but actually that's nothing real has changed in that perspective. So in order to try and make the two submissions comparable, we particularly called out the 17 million grant, which was always going to be there to cover the retail rate relief. But in the first submission, that was already included in that had sort of been netted off against the gross retail NNDR losses. Whereas in the second submission, it hadn't been netted off, so we needed to show it separately. Obviously, government has given us certain grants, the 13 million general grant, and then also specific grants for things like track and trace, infection control and care homes and so on. And that's obviously netted off against the total loss of income and additional expenditure, which is how we end up with the gap that we show in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Swirsky.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of Cabinet questions. We have overrun them by 26 minutes, so we've overrun them by 8 minutes, but you know there's some important questions there. So can we move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the key decision schedule? Just want you to note 2 important points. The report on the dry mixed recyclables, which was due to come to the June Cabinet, has been withdrawn from the agenda. And the report on the 2021 savings update has been withdrawn from the agenda for July Cabinet, and was planning to move that, incorporate that as part of the COVID-19 update report instead in July. So is that agreed?
Great.
Thank you. Progress on scrutiny projects. Can Cabinet note the progress that is being made that's set out on the agenda in the report? Thank you. See everyone waving their hands. We now move on to item 8, which is the COVID-19 update report. I've been in, people have indicated they do wish to speak on this report, so we use the system of how to bring people in. I'd just like to do some brief introductions to this report. This report tonight gives an open and transparent update on the ongoing strategic response that the Council is making to the COVID-19 emergency, and also sets out some of the work that is being undertaken as we move services back to normal and for the future. The Council has been working flat out, I think, over the past few months on social care, on homelessness, obtaining protective equipment for the front line, delivering food and essential supplies, ensuring that our critical services continue to be delivered to our residents, especially those who are most vulnerable, and more recently responding to the changes to lockdown. I would like to take this opportunity really to place on record my thanks for the outstanding activity that has continued to be delivered in partnership with the voluntary sector through the Community Hub, which has provided services both to those shielded and to other vulnerable residents who are in need of support. And this is still continuing, and the commitment of these volunteers is nothing less than amazing. In a moment, I will invite Cabinet members to highlight some of the key areas that are within the report. But by way of introduction, I would like to take the opportunity as chair of the meeting to take the opportunity to highlight a few areas myself. So firstly, as I progress through the report, you can follow the flow through. Head teachers, staff, unions, governing bodies and council staff have worked exceptionally hard to increase the number of children attending their schools, which they've been doing throughout the crisis, based on a thorough risk assessment, putting in place protective measures and to a timetable that they judge to be safe for pupils and school staff. In a moment, I will ask Christine to update us on Children's Services, who have worked hard to support our younger generation. Over recent weeks, we've seen a lot of news about test, track, trace and isolate, which is a vital component of the strategy for lifting lockdown and suppressing the spread of COVID-19. A key piece of work by the Council over the past few weeks, and which is highlighted in the report, has been the development of our local capacity to support the delivery of this key task of test and trace, and key local outbreak management plans are being put in place. The Council has also focused on supporting care homes, which has been with our partners in the National Health Service. I would say that the partnerships that have developed over the past few years with the NHS and others in the public sector have been tested during this pandemic, and it is a credit to all involved that issues were identified and jointly resolved very quickly. As services start to be restored, it is that strong partnership that is preparing us for any future waves of COVID-19. Professor Fenton recently stated in the report, which finally got published this week, that the best way to improve health outcomes for BAME communities is through integrated healthcare, and I am pleased to say that the teams are doing a lot of positive work in this area. The community-based out-of-hospital work mentioned in the report is also a key priority for the Council going forward, and I'll ask Simon to update us further on this piece of work in a moment. Moving on to the next part of the report, we can see that across Harrow, we've all seen the ever-increasing number of people out and about, and it's quite clear that the health emergency has significantly affected the way we use public transport and the ways in which we travel. We're seeing more people walking and cycling, which is good news for our environment and health, and we must keep them safe. Our normal transport funding from the TfL has been suspended, so I'm pleased that the team were very successful in bidding for funding to improve our streets for pedestrians and growing number of cyclists. And in a moment, I'll ask Varsha to give us more information around that piece of work, and also an update around our environmental services, like the depot reopening, bins collected, streets cleaned and enforcement against fly tippers. A precautionary tale amongst the pandemic is throughout the crisis we have had around 22 rough sleepers placed in accommodation in Harrow. We've also seen a rising number of approaches to the Council around potential homelessness going forwards. We currently have 298 households living in bed and breakfast, when in 2011 we had none. I will ask Phil to update us in a minute on the pressures that we are facing around homelessness and also about housing moving forward. I think this pandemic has shone a light on the rising levels of poverty across our borough. Over 30,000 Harrow residents have been furloughed. We have seen our universal credit claimant count increase to 5,720, which is up by 112% since this time last year. And we are acutely conscious that over the next few months, we're anticipating a significant number of redundancies and job losses. Our economic development team have been working with the business community to assess the support they need and trying to put on the training and development they desperately need. And the council tax team, working 7 days a week, have paid all of the business grants, and Keith will update us in a moment where we are with all that. And following the question from Councillor Patel earlier on, and Adam's answer, which is sort of spelled out some of that, all of this work has put significant financial pressures on the council and remains our biggest strategic concern. Although emergency government funding of £13.1 million has been made available to date this will fall a long way short of the estimated additional costs and loss of income that the council will face, and Adam will update us on the financial position and also on how we will be preparing for the future. I will like to sort of finish in a way that in Harrow we have worked hard with all of our diverse communities to build a cohesive borough and make it a place where we are all proud to live and work without fear. Since the last cabinet meeting, we have witnessed the death of George Floyd at the hands of the police in Minnesota, which has highlighted the deep inequalities and systemic racism that still exists in many countries. A golden thread throughout our borough plan is tackling inequality, and we are committed to this, and this shows the urgency of why it needs to be addressed. But I would say our strength in Harrow is in our togetherness. We must never allow hatred and racism to divide us. Just as we came together to support each other through the COVID-19 pandemic, we also came together against racism and the hatred it represents. We will not tolerate any form of discrimination. We will continue to challenge racism, discrimination and inequality, and we will be moving that agenda forward quite quickly. I would now like to invite Sean as the Chief Executive to make, if he wants to add anything about the introduction to the report. Thank you, Sean.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Sean. Thank you.
Sorry, I turned my camera on but forgot to turn the microphone on. Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a small number of comments in support of an introduction to the report. Obviously, this report is focused on the work that's happened, particularly over the last 4 weeks in responding to the emergency since the May Cabinet meeting, which has seen, obviously, on the one hand, the continuation of dealing with the emergency situation and the provision of critical services, but also a lot of work both across the council and within the local community and businesses to start to support the ending of lockdown and the reopening and restarting of services, which has included everything from services such as the Household Waste Recycling Centre to helping support the town centre reopening this week. And clearly, one of the things I want to do as Chief Executive is to pay tribute to council officers at all levels within the organisation, both those staff who are working directly in the community, those who are supporting our most vulnerable residents, and those who are supporting those more back office services that helps keep the organisation running. And I think we've seen an incredibly impressive and powerful set of work across the council in order to be able to deliver this. And I just think it's important, as I know all members do, we wish to put on record our thanks to officers who have delivered extensively at this time. Clearly, we're also beginning to plan for the next phase of the easing of lockdown over the next few weeks. And we will clearly, by the time we get to the next Cabinet report, be able to update in more detail on that. And also, you'll clearly see in the report the work that we've started to put together around the longer term recovery and challenges that we'll face going forward. But I may say something about that later with your agreement, Chair. But I just thought I would just want to put those key messages on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I have had a number of indications prior to meeting and now. So if I let you know the order they're coming through, then I think Andre, who's sort of allowing people in, will be able to bring people in the right order. So if I say the order I've seen is Christine, Simon, Barsha, Phil, Keith, Adam, Councillor Paul Osborne and John Higgins. If we go to that order, then it allows Andre to bring people in at the right time. So, Christine.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. In the report, you'll see there is a brief account of ongoing work, both within the Education Directorate and the Children's Social Care Directorate. And it's a story of good supportive partnerships. The community of Harrow Schools really stepped up to the plate, as you know, and are continuing to do so with our support as they now the lockdown eases a little and they're extending the range and the number of children who are attending schools. We've got a good, supportive, trusting partnership, and I'm proud of that. And you'll see that the figures for children attending show a steady increase. And I think that's testament to the trust on all sides. At two recent meetings we held with head teachers and last night with school governors, the feedback was very strong expressions of gratitude for the access to advice and for the support which they had received from the local authority. In children's social care, good steady work. I mean, there was a point when there were members of staff who were ill or self-isolating, but our workforce is now up to about, I think, about 90%. Teams were working 7 days a week. Just to go back to schools, I mean, you'll know schools, they were open all the time. There's no this thing about schools opening. They were always open, and they worked weekends, they worked bank holidays, and didn't have a holiday as such. And the same in social care. And the standard of work has been kept up. The emergency response has been very strong, though things went very quiet. I think everybody kind of stayed in, didn't they, to start with? And the work has become a mixture, a combination of face-to-face contact and some virtual meetings. Young people who are very strongly connected are also really enjoying the additional interest, I suppose, in having virtual meetings with social workers as well as other meetings. As the lockdown is easing, we are anticipating that more concerns are going to come to light about children's safety, but we're there, we're in contact, and as I think I mentioned before, we opened a special line for schools to make direct contact with the multi-agency support hub if there new concerns presented about children who they began to feel nervous about because they'd not been in touch. I think that it's a good story, and I'm proud of the services and the officers and the school teachers and all the work that everyone has done. We're bracing ourselves, as I'm sure everybody is, because as people have been saying in discussions throughout, we don't really know what this is going to look like, but we're prepared for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Simon?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'd just like to expand a little on a couple of key elements of the COVID situation. In adult social care, well, firstly, we've continued effectively to manage the placement of our residents who are being discharged from hospital, particularly in Northwick Park, including those patients who are COVID positive, without any delays or problems. No delayed discharge issues here, and it shows. You mentioned joint working. We've worked effectively with West London partners to ensure we had enough care home places for any COVID positive residents who were being discharged from Northwick Park, and that worked fine. We've continued to support our social care clients with personal outreach when they couldn't go to their normal neighbourhood resource centres or the Bridge or Wiseworks, and that's working well. And we're working, planning how to then move forward as the possibility of some of these centres reopening in some form or other. That's in the planning stage now. As you've mentioned, Leader, we've supported our care providers actually on a daily basis, including, of course, top-up PPE supplies for them so none of them ran out, and advice and help on isolation and infection control and a number of other things. And then along with our partners in the CCG, as you mentioned, we set up local testing facilities. This is Alexandra Avenue, and this enabled us to offer care home staff in our local area a local testing facility that they could get to easily, including our using Harrow special needs transports to help them get there, so that these care home staff members were not forced to be absent from work because they and their households couldn't get a test. So that was a Harrow initiative to set this up ourselves on the CCG. And I guess the future will see us working much more closely with our local health and community partners in Harrow and across Northwest London, building upon these experiences, I guess, in what has been so far a high-performing collaboration. I think it's clear that COVID-19 has shed light, or shone a spotlight, if you like, on a number of areas of inequality in Harrow. Obviously, inequalities in the geography of where you live and your life expectancy, inequalities based on deprivation, on housing, on employment, and inequalities based on your ethnicity. And we talk in the report about the out of hospital recovery plan, which is a plan from the NHS and from us, and in fact is building on our best practice response so far to ensure that the key areas that are addressed in the report are supported by a local health partnership, and that we can cope with the second and subsequent waves of the pandemic as they come along. Areas that we want to focus on, quite rightly, we will focus on the mental well-being of our residents, because we've seen the effects that lockdown has had on mental health throughout the borough. We will focus on supporting our care providers, recognising that they deserve recognition and parity of esteem to other parts of the NHS, and we want to be able to assist them in any further local outbreaks that there may be of the virus through our public health colleagues and other partners. Details are in our care home action plan in the report, which covers such things as testing, PPE, workforce support, and prevention, infection prevention and control. And we will, of course, focus on the disproportionate impact on our BAME communities that the pandemic has had, and what actions we need and must take to mitigate against this. So I guess overall, I'm happy, although happy is probably the wrong word. I'm satisfied that as a local authority, we've reacted well to the pandemic so far. I do, along with my colleagues, praise the hard work and efforts of staff within my department and across the council. And I think we're now ready and able to play our part in the next phases, particularly in the test and trace regime, which we've been planning for on a local level, which will be so important in combating the next waves of the pandemic when they come along. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Simon. There's a lot of information there, but it's detailed in the report. So thank you very much. Varsha.
Thank you, Leader. As I said last time, we are not immune to the virus, and I am happy to report that a lot of our staff are returning from self-isolation, etc. So that is very pleasing to hear. We continue to carry out our operational services as we have done throughout. The billing collections has been done. Garden waste continues to grow. Street scene has been happening, unfortunately, with limited capacity, but we are trying to grow all of that, and we will get up to speed with what's outstanding, and picking up fly tipping as well. The civic amenity site is now open, business as usual, after initial opening by postcodes. Moving forwards, we will be moving to a booking system option, and details will be coming up soon. As you know, this week we had the reopening of our town and district centres, and there's a lot more information in the supplemental. 60% of the businesses were able to open. We were awarded £221,000 from the reopening the town centre fund to support and prepare for this. We have put in a series of measures like barriers, signage, floor markers, and supported businesses to prepare, advising them what to do, etc. As well as working with our economic development team, which is very important across council. Overall, it has gone well, and any issues that were risen have been resolved. The first day was very busy, as you know, with 2 shops prominent with queues, Primark and Spots Direct. Things are calming down a little, but we are prepared for any rush at the weekend. But we in tandem to this, we are also working very rapidly because of time limits to widen the roads for walking and cycling, which the leader has alluded to, with funds that were awarded to us through the Street Space Fund, which by the TfL. Which has replaced the LIP funding that we usually get. The information has been sent out to all members because most of the wards are in those projects. All those projects that were on the LIP funding have been put on hold. Some may not happen, but we will have to wait and see what happens in the future with the funding. Our parks and open spaces have remained open and enforced, etc. With the opening of the town centre, we've had to move some of the resources just to support in that. And the green gyms and playgrounds continue to be closed until further notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Varsha. Very important stuff there. Phil. Oh, Phil's disappeared. We seem to have lost Phil. Phil, you're still on mute for some reason, Phil.
Okay, I don't know how much you heard. First of all, I'd just like to thank all those officers working in housing services, in particular those who volunteered their time to actually keep on contacting our most vulnerable tenants. I'm sure those contacted appreciated the council contacting, and we continue to support some of those today. As you mentioned, Lisa, we have supported over 22 rough sleepers have now been accommodated outside the borough and in the borough. Also, I'd just like to say that, as you clarified, there were 298 households in temporary accommodation. Currently, we seem to have a very low number of new homeless people approaching the council as a result of the COVID epidemic. But I'm sure that may increase. Additional hotel, if it needs be, will be secured, and we will also monitor the rough sleeping. I think overall the two main challenges the council will face is that as delays will occur in welfare benefits, we will see the significant increase in residents applying for universal credit. Employment challenges will come about as the furlough schemes reduce on the number of hours, and also we're already seeing an increase in rent arrears. Fortunately, the government, and another factor is when the government guidelines from protecting social and private renters from eviction, I'm sure we're going to see an increase in number of people presenting homeless. We are planning for that. We're doing some work already on how we can do that. And we also, in regard to the rough sleeping initiative, we wait further information from Dame Louise Casey, who has been doing some work on behalf of the government on how they're going to tackle rough sleeping in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. That's quite an important area we're heading into. I can't remember the list we've read out now. Keith.
Thank you, Leader. I'm glad to report that the two main sources of funding to small businesses, that is the Small Business Grant and the Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Grant, we have now cleared all of the applications that have been made for those two particular grants. There are still a few people that we've chasing up to get more information, but as we speak at the moment, that particular workload is finished. If we go on to the so-called discretionary grant, we have enough funding for 210 eligible applicants. That's £10,000 to 210 businesses, the 2.1 million that we've received for that. The window for application closed last Friday on the 12th of June. On that date, we had received 247 applications. Of these, 41 have been passed straight through for payment. There are 57 of those applicants being chased for additional information, and that is issues relating to traders and businesses not being issued with up-to-date leases or licenses for the property they rent, leases in the name of a different family member, and applicants providing a different bank account from the company name. In addition, there have been 37 referred for spotlight checks. These relate to multiple applications from companies under the umbrella of one company. The remainder, which is 71, have not been accepted. But I would point out that out of those 71, we have identified 15 companies that are not eligible for the discretionary grant, but are eligible for the small business grant. So we've referred them to that. We've still got 41 that we've yet to process. And we believe that when we've done all of this work, probably towards the end of this week or next week, we still will have some funding left over. We intend to change the criteria to include small traders, and we will reopen the window for applications when we know how much funding we've got left. Successful applicants so far have included market traders, including South Harrow Market, nurseries, architects, travel businesses, charities, accountants, solicitors, and hair and beauty businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. It's good news that we're moving forward. Adam, I think.
Thanks, Graham. So I'll just pick up on the funding points to start with. So we talked earlier with Councillor Patel about the increase in cost that we've seen between the first submission that we made to government and the second submission of about £2.8 million. And we know that's because of the additional costs of things like PPE and adult social care. And I'd make the point that there continues to be risks to our budget going forward, not least from additional costs relating to things like reopening the civic centre, the significant cleaning costs, but also reopening a whole range of other services. But again, it's likely to be more costly with additional cleaning and other requirements related to COVID. Councillor Patel mentioned that we'd received a £13 million grant from government to cover our costs. But given that you'll see that the total amount of additional spending plus lost income is £38 million, that does leave a £25 million gap that we're forecasting, which is additional to what we'd anticipated for this year. So obviously that's enormous, and we're making some very significant representations to MHCLG, both directly, and we've had conversations directly with senior officials there, but also through colleagues across London and nationally through the LGA as well. I think it's also helpful just to note that there have been all kinds of funding announcements that government's made and the Prime Minister has referenced, things like money for infection control or track and trace. But of course, this funding that comes to us is directly linked to additional costs we have to incur. So it doesn't help us close that £25 million gap that we have. I also wanted to just pick up very briefly on two other areas in my portfolio that aren't covered in the paper. The one on IT, obviously in the current environment, there's been a lot of visibility, let's say, on some of our IT and some of the challenges that we've had on the IT that hasn't been upgraded in a very, very long time. And we were, in any case, undertaking a major upgrade program, but that's only become more relevant. And if you look across the sweep of projects that we have now in our IT team, the new director, you'll see that the ambition is huge to take us from a very, very poor state into a position where our teams will be much, much more effective working both in a flexible way, but also critically delivering services for residents. So I think that's a positive investment that we are making, which will continue to improve our capabilities to deal with COVID potentially second waves and simply deliver better services in future. And the other piece on HR, there's a number of issues here. Clearly, we've been doing a lot of work with our union colleagues on health and safety, on ensuring that staff are supported with their well-being while working at home, and that's only something that we need to spend more time, more focus on as time goes by. But also in the context of the Black Lives Matter resurgence and the death of George Floyd, thinking about how we support our staff from BAME backgrounds in particular, who may well be finding this time incredibly difficult, working with our staff groups in that area, making sure there's space for conversation around that, and also looking to just accelerate our work around diversity, around equalities. And the government announced yet another review into this area. Well, we had our review in Harrow 6 years ago. There was some action taken as a result of that, but there's a lot more to do. We will be revisiting the recommendations made by Dalbabu in 2014 to make sure they're 100% implemented, and that we go above and beyond to make sure that we have a workforce and senior workforce that reflects the diversity of our borough. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Adam. Greatly appreciate it. Paul, did you want to make a statement and questions, or would you just want to go?
I have
questions.
I've got a series of questions. I've tried to divide them up into 4 chunks to give people a chance to answer. Normally I wouldn't do this, but it's such a wide-ranging report, it's difficult to kind of get it all in one thing. So first thing I wanted to ask is around the discretionary grants scheme for businesses. My understanding is that we got actually significantly more money than we designed the scheme for. We were anticipating getting money based on the figure we actually paid out, but we actually got money based on the 41 million that we were originally projected to pay. So my question is, when we look at the second tranche of this, can we, and I think he kind of touched on it, there's been a number of people who've just been missed out for various reasons. The one in particular that's been raised to me is people who are based at home, who don't qualify under this current tranche. And it'd be nice if we can find some way for those businesses where they have a trading track record and where they have some other things that we can look at them. Also, in particular, I've been contacted by a number of nurseries that seem to have fallen out of all the different schemes and are suffering quite badly, and it'd be nice if we can look at that. So that's the first kind of area. I don't know if Keith will agree to look at those areas.
Yes, if I can come back on that. Sole traders and nurseries are in the second tranche. When we say discretionary, of course, we were given a whole lot of parameters of people that we could pay and couldn't pay by the government. We were given 2.1 million. We decided that each of these companies should receive 10,000. Any figure less than 10,000 would have spread it so low that we wouldn't really be saving very many companies from insolvency. Anything more would have meant that we couldn't really help as many companies as we wish to. So that was the reason that we got 210 companies that we could support with the 10,000. Obviously, if we'd have used all of the parameters that the government set us, we would have received thousands of applications. So we chose the parameters fairly carefully to make sure that we would get somewhere in the order of 210 applications, which I'm glad to say 247 isn't too far off. Once we've worked out exactly how much money that we've been able to distribute under this, we will be reopening the window, and we will include sole traders, and we will include nurseries in that as well.
Thank you. And it's important that the sole trader might be based at home, not necessarily have a property or shared office space, because that's been one of the things that they haven't really been able to benefit.
Yeah, it's a it's the way their company is organised. They're not incorporated as a company. They're a sole trader working on themselves. It doesn't matter whether they're occupying premises or whether they're working at home. And also we obviously realise that some of these sole traders do employ people.
Thank you. On the environment side of things, can I just ask, first of all, on the street space side of things, Obviously, I understand that officers had to rush to get the grants to TfL, or get the application for grants to TfL within that timescale. But a number of ward councillors would really like to be involved in what we do and what we do going forward. Particularly, as you've heard earlier, there's some issues in Kenton around the scheme in Kings Hill Avenue. There's also concerns that some people have raised to me about elderly people and disabled people. If we take away too many parking spaces and reduce the ability to drive too much, there's some people who can't cycle and have difficulty walking, and just how we deal with that. There's also, in places like Pinner, the opportunity to go a bit further than some of the schemes proposed. I know I've been contacted by a couple of businesses there that might be interested in looking at the high street and whether that's closed over weekends to allow pedestrianisation. And there's schemes like that that might be worth discussing. So it would be great if you could give some thought to how we engage with ward councillors. I'm not sure that the current online portal particularly works for some of those schemes, because some of them need to be talked through with officers just to understand some of the knock-on effects in terms of traffic flow and all the rest of it. And on the waste and recycling centre, I'd just be grateful if you could actually give a time when the booking system is likely to go live, and also why we stopped doing the postcode system before we introduced the booking system. Again, my email box has been full of people who live in that area and have had real problems with the traffic in that area, and especially getting to hospitals, because it's on the route to Northwick Park Hospital for a number of people. I just, it would have been more sensible, I think, to have kept the postcode scheme, which seemed to be broadly working, until we had the booking scheme live, because I do think that's the long-term solution to this problem. So a date on that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So on the street scheme, you're right, we have a portal where residents and members can participate. And we did only have a very short period of time where we were able to put our submissions in, bearing in mind that it was the funds are quite limited, and sometimes it's unfair to say this, but it's a bit like first come, first serve sort of thing. We did use some of the projects that were in line in our TARSET programme, and some of the other programmes were things that were listed for future. Now, I do understand that there is frustration with members thinking that we haven't consulted, we haven't informed and asked them. And that was purely, not to be disrespectful, but it's purely because of time limits. And if we miss the timing, then we would miss the amount of monies that we could go for. So the officers have agreed that if ward councillors want a briefing, then they're happy to do that. That's not a problem. And if you have any particular, like some of your suggestions, Paul, officers and myself are very happy for you to email us any of your suggestions, etc. And we will look at them and see how we could put them forward within some of the criteria and the things that we have to work towards as well. With the civic community, the proposed code was working very well, and we thought that we were quite happy for it was starting to calm down, so we thought we'll do business as usual. The booking system is a lot of work has gone into it, and I believe that we should be coming alive in the next few weeks, but we are still just making sure that we have everything in place so that there's minimal disruption. Obviously, once we have a lot more detail, I can come back to you officers and come back to you and give you a briefing on that, if that's helpful.
Thank you. I just ask, if the traffic problem continues beyond a couple more days, I looked actually today on the camera and it didn't seem to be as bad as it had been on previous days. So I don't know if that was just the time I happened to look or whether it's more general, but if that is, and the booking system does take longer than a few weeks, will you look at reintroducing the postcode system? Because I think, that I was sceptical about it at the beginning, to be honest, but it has, I think, broadly worked. And there's certainly acceptance from residents that did make a difference.
Yes, it has worked very well. There's certain days that are a bit more heavier on the traffic than other days. And like I said previously, and you've noted as well, that things have calmed down a bit. And, you know, with anything, Paul, we will always review. And if we felt that we needed to put something back in just to give us that leeway, then we would definitely do that. So we're always reviewing, you know, and making sure that we work with the residents and members as well and listen to what's been said.
Thank you. And can I just ask, you don't need to reply to this, but just can you ask your officers? There are a number of businesses in Pinner that are waiting to hear if they can do tables and chairs as part of their reopening plans, and it'd be helpful if officers could get back to them when they have a firm idea of what's possible, because obviously these things can't happen overnight from a business point of view. They need a lead time as well as that. So I understand the difficulty and capacity issue, but where possible, we'd be grateful if officers could contact those businesses. My final kind of area is on the school appeals, and it's really a small question, but I'm just curious. In the report, it says that the school's appeal panel will meet virtually, but via telephone and not video conferencing. I was just wondering if there was some opportunity to look at doing video conferencing as an option, because I think whilst virtual meetings aren't ideal, having done my fair share over the past few weeks of both video conferences and telephone conferences, it's much easier to do a video one and you get much more sense of what's going on. And given the importance that some parents are going to put on this appeal and what happens to their children's place in school, it will just be, I think, better if it's possible for them to do it via video conference rather than telephone conference.
If I may reply, I understand entirely where you're coming from, Paul, and thank you for your thought about this. The reason given, as I understand, I'm just looking for the comment in the, but I remember reading it before, was wondering how people may feel in some way disadvantaged if they were going to be video called and therefore their home setting would be on display. And that was why the decision was made to do a telephone call. In fact, this morning, because I'm on the fostering and placement panel, that has been running on telephone only. And I understand that a school place is a very important decision for a parent to make. But I've had the privilege of sitting through 3.5-hour telephone sessions in which prospective adoptive parents and people who are putting themselves forward as carers for children in distress and need, and we've used telephone calling and it has worked absolutely fine. So I hear what you're saying, but I hope you'll also hear what we're saying, which is that sometimes people do feel intruded upon. Yeah. But I mean, I can take your comments back and I'll put them through to the Education Directorate and see how they've gone with reviewing this, because as Varsha said, reviewing is always the way forward. So I will certainly do that.
Thank you. I think I understand some people might not want it, but I think where they do want it, it should be something we can offer. And maybe it's a kind of, you can opt out of it or opt into it, or it's more of a choice for the person doing the appeal. But I leave it to you and officers. Finally, I just want to comment on the Harrow Strategic Partnership. I don't want to go into massive detail in this because I know we have done on numerous occasions, but I do still find it incredible that we are scoring a bid on the basis of things that are never going to happen. You know, we don't know now what our civic centre requirements are going to be. The report here talks about not being able to have more than 250 people in the current building, whether or not we reoccupy the current building. The new ways of working are massively changing. We don't know what the residential market's going to look like in the coming 6 months to 12 months. And the commercial property market, I suspect, will change massively over the coming 12 months and beyond. And I just really think to take a pause for a few more months just to let things settle a bit and to get a sense of both what we want from the scheme and also where the market is, which will be delivering the scheme, would be in the best interest of Harrow. This is a huge project that's gone on for multiple years now. The difference that a month or two might make is quite small compared to the problem we might have if we choose the wrong partner in this based on things that are just not any more likely to be commercially viable. And thank you, that's it for me.
you want me to answer that?
If you could quickly.
I think you've got to be. Yeah, you've got to be quite clear. What we're doing is selecting a partner based on a set of parameters. So we've gone from 36 applications down to 5 applications. We're now down to 2 applications, and this is merely selecting the partner. We're not accepting bids for a particular project or a series of projects. Once we've selected that partner, we will sit down and use their expertise as well to determine exactly which is the best and most profitable and economic solution. And as I said in response to Marilyn, this will include a lot of other parameters that have come up since we've gone into this process, such as the use of the building at the depot, and of course the changes that have occurred since COVID's been going on. So it's quite right to select the partner based on a fixed set of parameters as the best partner that we could have, and then we will sit down with the partner, and as I said, we hope to have him selected by the cabinet meeting in September, and that partner will help us to look at the future of our regeneration programme.
Thank you, Keith. John Higgins.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to focus on the particular issues for the voluntary and community sector. I think it's acknowledged that the crisis has shown the value of a vibrant community and voluntary sector, and the community hub particularly demonstrates what can be achieved at pace in an emergency by both the sector working with the council jointly. And I think we certainly are keen to build upon that, and I think you acknowledged that in your opening remarks, Leader. Certainly the need for practical support on the ground is only going to continue and likely to expand. I mean, the report states that the community hub will be needed probably at least up till Christmas, although I suspect beyond that. The downturn in the economy will result in increased need, which has also been acknowledged in the course of the meeting, and as will the rollout of track and trace service, likewise increase the need for some of these practical services that have been offered through the hub. A recent survey by National Council for Voluntary Organisations and two other organisations projected that the drop in income for voluntary and community organisations is likely to be of the order of something like 48%, and they put a figure of 4 billion on that nationally. A more recent study of organisations identified that small charities were more likely to experience a problem with their finances, with of those being surveyed, 12% thinking that they would possibly not be able to continue to operate. So there's clearly a big issue around the financial stability of the sector, given what's happened with the pandemic. So I suppose I've got two main key questions really. One is it possible to do any work locally to assess the likely financial impact on the sector in the way that the council's begun to do in terms of the council's finances, and whether that could be reported back at the next report coming to the next cabinet. And then secondly, the way forward has been described as the borough plan is going to be the mechanism by which we'll look to develop recovery. And I'd just like some clarity about how the community and voluntary sector will be involved in the development of that plan.
So did you want to pick some up and I pick the remainder?
Yes, I'm happy to pick that up. Yeah, you're quite right. The future funding and financial stability of the voluntary and community sector organisations here and right across the country, it's a really worrying thing. As you say, a £4 billion shortfall is not something to be looked at lightly. And I think this is one of the things that we have been sort of taking up, or the leader has been taking up during discussions with I think it's DCLG. No, it's not. It's anyway. You know how the local government, the Ministry for Local Government, because actually you can't say we're going to do a really good job. The voluntary sector have been wonderful, and then just let them collapse. So yeah, so that's something that's been taken up. Obviously, a bit of higher level. I think it'd be interesting to find out how local organisations are affected. I'm not sure we've got the resources available to actually sort this out before next report, but it's certainly something we'll take away and discuss. Remind me what the other thing was. I've forgotten.
It was really how the sector, how you plan to involve the sector in development of the borough plan.
Oh right, yes, of course, the borough plan. Sorry, there's a kind of bit of noise going around the back of my house that distracted me. Yes, no, the borough plan. We have in fact been talking a lot about the borough plan and how we're going to involve people. It's come up a couple of times today already, actually. But the problem we have at the moment is we don't know what the net effect of the COVID-19 epidemic is going to be. And obviously the borough plan is something that's going to evolve, and it's going to have to take into account those sort of changes and that difference that we really see is going to happen, because we don't know where our sort of final point is going to be. So we're probably not going to do much consultation on it until we get certainly into the autumn, when hopefully we'll have a clearer picture of what's going to be. But certainly when I've been having discussions with people from voluntary organisations, we have been talking about the borough plan. There's been a lot of interest in getting involved in, discussions about the borough plan. And it's certainly something we're very keen to get everybody involved in, talking about those areas that are a particular issue to different organisations and different people and different residents groups. So sorry, that's a bit vague, but it's because at the moment my crystal ball is just very cloudy.
I'll just comment, John, on the finances. You're quite right. It is a major concern that the normal financial income streams of the voluntary sector have been hard hit. So the bequests they normally get, lump sum payments, have slowed down. But also the normal things around charity and fundraising are a complete standstill, which has given that £4 billion gap. So we don't have the resources to actually support all of them. So what we're trying to do is work collaboratively with them around funding bids, which Sue has worked with the paravoluntary sector. We're looking at how we can sort of, as some of the charity shops start opening and how they sort of start working, we're trying to work out some support through there. I do think it is a very moving picture around how we can build support. But I think what is positive from the from what's happened over the last few weeks is that the voluntary sector, the council and the community sector have gelled so well in that support. So where the council did pre-fund a lot of the work that was taking place, we did manage to support them through grant applications that have been coming through, like the National Lottery bids, Trust for London and all the major funders that are around the country that are coming in. And I think that's in a sort of, so moving forward, I think we need to look towards around co-producing how we move as a borough, which is the route we want to use is the borough plan, because it sets out across the whole borough how we're going to, so we can jointly move forward together, I think. And that consultation will be taking place. And so that's coordinated through the voluntary sector. We've also got how we consult with the community itself, and also people like the business sector. So all those groups be brought together.
Can I just add there, I hope John will make sure that all charities are aware of our business grant scheme, and in particular the discretionary business grant schemes, because charities are eligible to apply for these grants.
Excellent. Thank you, Keith. John, did you have another question, I thought?
No, I didn't. I mean, that is all very positive in terms of response. I mean, I suppose I was seeing the borough plan not as a piece of paper, but more as a process, and as you say, a developing process. And so I was seeing it more than just being about consultation, but actually how people are involved in that process. But I mean, the answers that's been very helpful, and certainly, Keith, perhaps I can email you and make sure I've got the details, so I can email out through the routes that I've got, which I know has already happened. But there's no harm in reminding people of about those grants, so that's helpful. Yeah. I mean, the only other thing I would say is I hadn't expected that the council were going to be able to put any financial money into sustain the sector, but it's more about understanding what that's looking like, and then actually making the case more widely to central government and whoever. And I think the approach of co-producing funding bids, I mean, absolutely, that is something we want to continue with.
Yeah. If I point out, probably the easiest way to do that, John, is to make sure charities go to our council website where we've got all the details on. But I'm quite happy if you or any other charity want to email us. And also the Economic Development Unit has an officer who is dedicated to writing bids, particularly for small organisations and as well as the council. So we're quite happy to help us any way we can.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yes, thank you very much for the contribution so far. We've allowed this debate to carry on because it is such an important report. You know, it's affecting quite a wide-ranging area of the council's activities. At the beginning, in the contribution from Sean, I think Sean was talking about some elements of the recovery he wants to come back to. Did you want to raise them now, Sean?
Thank you, Chair. I think obviously most of the points that have been discussed have actually extended into the part of the report around the recovery. So I'm not sure there's a huge amount to add, other than to say that clearly at the next Cabinet meeting in July, we will bring a further update in relation to how we're responding to the emergency, which I anticipate will have reduced further by that point. But clearly we'll also be spending time in the next Cabinet report updating on the further moves we've made to respond to the further easing of the further anticipated easing of lockdown. But also in the next Cabinet report, we're intending to start setting out, and I think I'd want to emphasise, start setting out two things. First of all, what is being referred to as lessons learned. I think we will want to make sure that we do that in a way which both highlights those lessons that have been very good and effective that we would wish to continue, but also those areas where our response to the emergency would give us pause to rethink or address issues in order to make us as an organisation and a borough more resilient going forward, but also to set out perhaps some of the more medium to longer term work that we are seeking to do. And I think in particular in relations to John's question, I think that's where we can start to identify how all of the partners in the borough, whether they're from the voluntary sector, community sector, other public agencies, business, etc., local residents can contribute to those ideas. Because I completely agree, this is about making a long-term co-production around how we respond to these issues, but also about how we will work together with other partners around issues such as health and social care, housing and homelessness. But I think also particularly highlighting the medium to longer term issues around the economy. Along with our colleagues in West London, a piece of research has been undertaken by Oxford Economics, which is going to highlight potentially some of those big challenges around both businesses, employment and the wider economy. And we are working both at a London level and also a West London level and a local level to work out some of the steps that we will need to make in partnership with government, the GLA, local business, etc., other councils to address that. So it will be a long way away, Chair and Cabinet members, from being even the start of an answer, I suppose. But we will be thinking about how we take forward our work on that, because obviously the legacy of COVID, both in terms of organisational and in terms of the borough and in terms of the economy, will be long standing. And as we begin to come out of the emergency phase, it will allow us to set things out in more detail going forward. But that's more focused on the next report and subsequent reports, Chair, rather than today.
Thank you, Sean. That is well, I'd just like to say one final thing in closing the whole debate. I would like to thank everyone for their contributions tonight, which has set out the wide-ranging work of the council and the challenges ahead. And I think those challenges are quite serious in that we're coming from a quite financial impact, but also with a number of other challenges that have been identified. Just on one point that was made earlier on about the funding for the street scene, I think we should point out that the TfL funding we used to get, the LIP funding, that was withdrawn more or less straight away, which is £1.3 million. So some of these announcements for bids and funding bids come through at very short notice, and the team put in quite a few bids to the cycle schemes and road improvement schemes, but not all of them were accepted. So we were successful for quite a few, but that's sort of just a percentage of the ones we put in. So it was a good percentage of the ones we put in. But also I think some councillors have responded back to the officers with some ideas, and they've also now been submitted. And to give some idea about timetables, we got a letter late on Friday night to submit a bid by Tuesday morning around some capital infrastructure bids. So some of these bids come in very quickly, and I think when the officers need to put them in, going on the guidance of bids we put in previously and discussed, and then we need to really look at them in a positive way of moving them forward. Now, if we don't go ahead with that bid, that particular project, then we're in the danger of losing that funding. Also, I'd just like to say, I think earlier that there is a growing rise of health inequalities across the borough, and that also quite seriously affects people's life chances. So that is another key area of work that we haven't really delved into tonight, but I think we will as we start coming into the July Cabinet report about some of the work that is being done to improve other people's lives. And just as Sean was just saying, alongside the work the council's doing, we're also working with our neighbouring boroughs and across the public sector to ensure that we can properly tackle all these challenges ahead. And from seeing the reports and estimates of the significant job losses that are projected to come through, I think we still have a lot to do in the short term, but we do need that long-term plan to get people out, and I think that's where John was coming from. So in finality, I would like to commend the work that has taken place across the council, and would ask that Sean pass our sincere thanks on to the staff across the council for it's been relentless, I think, for the last 12 weeks, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down, because other priorities are coming about reinstating services, and it's quite a challenge, and we've seen people just continuing. So I would like now to move to, if you could pass that on, Sean, would be gratefully appreciated. I'd like now to move to the recommendations on page 16. I have a core number on the video screen, so if people could just signal that they support the recommendations on 16, I think we know we are. So we've got, yes, we've got enough people, so it is agreed to go forward. Thank you for that. So we agreed recommendation on page 16. We have some other short reports on the agenda, so we shouldn't take as long as the previous report, because it's very wide-ranging. So we now move on to item 9, which is special needs transport taxi framework. Barsha.
Thank you. This report is seeking approval to extend and seek provisions of the appropriate budgets to increase the taxi contract. So to increase the provision of the labour supply contract for the delivery of transport services for the users for the special needs transport service. The extension is required for up to a year to give us adequate time to complete the procurements for a new contract, which has been delayed due to the C-19. We also seek approval to increase our contract spend on the taxi contractors for our special needs passengers. The reason for these two approvals with these providers is so that we can ensure that the council fulfills its statutory function for transporting those with special needs and to procure the best deal we can get to deliver this critical service. We work very closely with our People's Directorate as the commissioners. The service is very complex and with many processes that need to run smoothly. The service needs has gone up, hence the increase in the value. It is a shared service with Brent and works well. Also to note that through the crises, the special needs transport was used for delivering food parcels and transporting people for testing for C19, while still transporting special educational needs children to schools. So thank you for that. That's it.
So I'm trying to unmute myself. Is there any question? I see, Paul, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I just have, I mean, this broadly seems like a reasonable thing to do. But I just have a question around paragraph 1.7. This is the second extension to the Drake International Limited side of this. Originally, it was going to be extended in 2019, but then in September 2019, we decided to expand it and do a lean review. I just wondered if that lean review had taken place and what the outcome of it was.
I don't have that information in front of me, Paul, so can I come back to you? But the reason we did have the procurement in place, but unfortunately with the crises, it's all been delayed, and that's why we've asked for this extension so that we can follow the process through. But the other question, I'll come back to you because I don't have the information in front of me.
I think Adam,
unless Adam has.
Yeah, Adam's involved with the part of the lean review.
Briefly add on that, through responsibilities for modernisation, I was part of that. We can obviously share more information about the review. Was all about ensuring there was a better connection between the social care teams and the transport operational teams, and I think there was some really strong progress around how that interconnection happened. Obviously, the reviews are fundamentally about process improvement and operational improvement, and so they're sort of technical in nature, but really important to make sure that we're both delivering the best possible service, get the best outcomes, but also, of course, at the lowest cost.
Thanks. It'd be really helpful to have a briefing on that with both myself and also the other shadow cabinet members, relevant shadow cabinet members. Thank you.
Excellent. So is there any other questions? No. So can we move to the recommendation on page, there's 3 recommendations on page 88. Can we agree the recommendations? I'm looking to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got there. Thank you very much. That is agreed. We now move on to item number 10, which is Headstone Manor Park Flood Alleviation Scheme. I think that is Keith.
Yeah, the reason I'm doing this instead of Varsha is that I know the area quite well. And being a chartered civil engineer, I can take up about half an hour of your time explaining the fluvial theories of the Yeddingbrook catchment area. But I suspect there's a lot of hungry people out there more interested in their dinner than they are of listening to me for half an hour on this. So I'll be very brief. The flood alleviation scheme is in the southeast of Headstone Manor Park. There is construction work going on elsewhere in Headstone Manor Park under a National Lottery Heritage Fund. And the contractor there is Ground Control Limited, who are doing a very good job. This report seeks to award the flood alleviation scheme work, which is approximately 1.4 million, without a procurement process to Ground Control Limited. You'll see on page 97 the benefits of awarding this to the incumbent contractor delivering the present project will be to save on preliminaries, ensure the overall prices are competitive through checking against the existing tendered rate, and to shorten the mobilisation period for the work and reduce inconvenience to park users. And the same team delivering the flood alleviation scheme, there will be a continuity in project management and community engagement in the projects. And the relations of the park user group and the contractor staff and operatives are already familiar with each other and have an established effective working arrangement. The second part of this proposal is to increase the capital programme allocation for the Headstone Manor Flood Alleviation Scheme by £250,000, and that is because the Environment Agency has given us an extra £250,000 to do this work, and therefore that figure needs to be changed in the budget.
Thank you, Keith. I see Paul has his hand up.
Yes, again. Sorry, I just wanted to ask around the procurement side of this. Exactly what makes it not feasible to run a competitive procurement exercise about the current situation. I just asked because we seem to be able to continue with the procurement for the strategic development partner. I'm just curious why we can't do a procurement exercise in this, given that people are already working on site there.
2 points of that is that the flood alleviation scheme has to be completed by March next year, and so work has to start on site in September. We wouldn't have time to do a complete competitive procurement process and meet those deadlines. If we didn't complete by the 31st of March next year, we would lose the 971,000 funding that have been put in place for this. And also because ground control were appointed after a competitive tender process, we'd be using the same rates as we've got with them at the moment. So we're quite happy that they are very competitive.
Okay, so this was one of the things that was delayed as a result of the crisis and probably would have come to Cabinet a few months ago had it not been like it. That makes more sense.
No, it hasn't been delayed because of COVID. In fact, the public consultation is still going on at the present moment, but we do want to be on site on the 1st of September to give ourselves a 6-month construction period.
So in that case, the reason we're not doing a procurement thing has nothing to do with COVID. It's due to the timeline for getting the grant.
That's right.
Okay, which is not what the report says.
It does mention it down there somewhere. I'll find it for you if you like.
It's very clear that the reason you can't do a procurement exercise is because of the current procurement implications section.
Well, we haven't been affected by COVID-19 on this scheme so far, but it's probable that if we went out and did a procurement exercise, that procurement exercise would take a lot longer than it would normally have done had we not got the current circumstances.
Thank you. I can't see any other question. I'd make a comment myself, actually, because some of it was delayed because of the weather earlier in the year, and then COVID has slowed some of the other work down. But I've seen the benefits of what this flood alleviation work can actually do. It's not about digging a big hole in the ground and fill it up with water. It is around the environmental impacts we have and ecology impacts. So the earth that's coming out of around Headstone Manor is going to build the bunds in Newton Park West in my ward, around Stanmore Marsh, and also up in Old Reading. So, you know, it's a good use of materials. We haven't got to pay disposal costs, but it does have that amazing impact. I'd urge people to go and see some of the work that's been done. I think also as well that even with the heavy rain over the last few weeks, after the sunshine, when the ground has got very cold, I know around Newton Park West, where that sort of weather a few years ago would have flooded certain roads. This year it hasn't, and it's kept the flood low. So it's doing two benefits. And we've also got the largest bug hotel in London, if anyone wants to go and see it. An amazing sites, bringing biodiversity back into the borough. And the ponds are now full of frogs, fish, and we got some little herons, and we got some ducks. I don't know what little ducks are, cygnets, isn't it? So it is an improvement, not just the sort of around flooding, so it's also got the wider environmental impact improvements. So as it is a key decision.
If I just point out in response to Paul, it's on page 97, and it says there is high confidence of the ability of the contractor to deliver by the deadline for the funding on the 31st of March 2021. And it also says further down the page, this has to be delivered by the 31st of March 2021.
I accept that, but it's not the reason given for the procurement not being done under a competitive process. That's what I was asking about.
No, but the point is that we wouldn't be able to do the procurement because most people are locked down at the moment, and it would take twice as long to do as it would normally do.
Yes, the Environment Agency are very strict on if the money's not spent, they get it back. We have recommendations on page, which page is it now? It's on page 95 and 96. Are they all agreed? Excellent, they're all waving. I see that they're proper waving. Thank you. We now move on to item 11, which is appointment of cabinet advisory panels, consultative forums and appointment of chairs. This is because we rolled over from the full council meeting, we have to still agree this part of it. But I would, before we do, I'd just note that the list of appointments was updated following the agenda publication and had to be issued as a supplementary agenda item. Is on the internet tonight. I would like to draw your attention to the updated appendix in the supplementary agenda, which sets out the appointments for 2021. Can we?
Sorry, just one thing. There's one thing wrong. The Employees Consultative Forum, our nominated member will be Mina Palmer. No one's listed as that. So other than that, I'm fine with it.
Okay, so making that, is that an amendment, Paul, or an addition?
It was in the list I provided. I just don't think it got picked up in the corrections. So.
Okay, we'll note that addition to the appointments, and then is that list now agreed? We can always come back and change committee panels appointments if we need to. And also so we agreed that item. If we now move to appointments of portfolio holder assistants, as I said earlier, because of this COVID-19, we have rolled over a whole load of committees and structures. So can you please note that the appointments have been rolled over from 2019-20, so there has been no change. So can we agree that there's no change? Excellent, thank you. So that moves us on to item 13. We have 11 items of any other urgent business. We haven't any tonight. I'd like to thank your time for everyone attending. We did take a lot of time on the item number 8 around the council's response, because it deserves that attention from us as elected representatives, and also we'll be looking forward to the report that comes through in July. Hopefully there is no sudden surge of COVID-19 in the borough. I think our officers have now built up quite a good resilience of new practices, and as Adam mentioned, we've now got remote working off to a fine art, and we've also now got online conference committee meetings online, which we didn't have 3 months ago, so that shows how we are moving forward. So thank you very much for your time and have a nice evening. Thank you.
Bye bye. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.